Thesis basics. The thesis statement is the main argument of your paper. It tells your reader what you intend to prove to them. Now think of this. A thesis sentence is the main argument or the main idea of your whole paper. It's one sentence. The way I like to say this is, imagine you write a 3-page, 5-page essay and you accidentally delete everything except one sentence. You turn in the one sentence and your professor or a fellow student can still go, oh, that's what the whole paper is going to be about. That's your thesis. Or another way of saying it is, let's say you could only write one sentence in response to your prompt or the teacher's instructions for the essay. And that one sentence is the answer to the question. You know, write an essay on blah, blah, blah. And here's your, you know, what is your view? What is your opinion? What is your viewpoint? That's a thesis. And so you have to state it in a sentence and then support it, which will take several pages. They must have two important parts. A thesis sentence must have two important parts. One, the topic, and the claim. What does that mean? Well, the topic is the subject. What are we writing about? For example, protesting. That is a subject or a topic. But the most important part is making a position, viewpoint, or an argument about it. So what about protesting do you want to say? And that part is a claim. A thesis must have an argument, okay? Without it, it's not a thesis. Here's an example where it's not a thesis. In this paper, I will talk about chicken. I mean, or you can put in the word protesting. In this paper, I will discuss protesting. That's not a thesis sentence. It's not what your whole paper is about. It has to be more specific than that, okay? Or protesting is a major thing going on in the United States. Well, that's not really an argument. Okay, thesis statements typically go at the end of the introduction in your essay. So that first paragraph of your essay, the last sentence of the first paragraph should be your thesis sentence. So what comes before the paragraph, before the thesis, is maybe 4 to 5 sentences of introductory sentences. Maybe you introduce the book you're writing about or the movie you saw. But what about the book? What about the movie? That's your sentence for your thesis. What about it? What's your position? What's your viewpoint? What's your perspective on that thing? This is a lot different than writing a book report or a summary. Here's how you know when you have a good thesis, strong thesis, or a clear thesis. Does my thesis statement make an argument, an opinion, or a perspective? And can you back it up? Can you support it? So people have decided to go to, Hawaii for vacations is not a thesis, but people who go to Hawaii for vacations have a better time than going to Phoenix, Arizona. That's a thesis statement, okay? Because it states an argument or a position. Another way I like to say this is your answer to the prompt debatable or arguable? In other words, can someone else agree or disagree? If someone can disagree with what you have to say, then most likely you have a clear thesis, a strong thesis. If no one can disagree with what you have as your thesis, then it's not clear enough. For example, many people own dogs. There's no one's going to disagree with that. But many people who own dogs have happier lives. People can disagree with that. For example, my next door neighbor and their dog barking all day. I don't think that person is very happy. Okay, so you got to have a viewpoint on something, and can you support it with evidence? Make sure that it's not a statement of a fact or of your topic. All right, let's do some practice here. This paper will discuss the dangers of flying on airplanes. Okay, that's not a thesis statement. Okay, why? It's not specific enough. It also doesn't take a position or a view. It's not debatable. Okay, of course there's dangers of flying airplanes. But if the sentence had said, this paper will discuss why or how flying on airplanes is more dangerous than riding the bus, then you have a thesis statement. Okay. Flying on airplanes is more dangerous than most people realize. Okay, that is a thesis statement. It's debatable, it's arguable, and people could disagree with that. Why? Because of the word more. If it was just flying on airplanes is dangerous, that's not a thesis. Okay, America's educational system is failing. Now, that is a thesis. Why? Look at the difference here between these two. Why is this one a thesis? Because some people can disagree with that. Oh, well, they'd say this area and this area and that area. So the problem with this thesis, though, is it's not specific enough. I would want this sentence to be, America's educational system is failing because, and then have, 3 or 5 different reasons why. America's educational system is failing because it lacks resources and proper training of its teachers. So there's 2 reasons why. Now that means for the rest of the paper, I have an idea of where we're going. I have an idea of what the person who wrote the essay's main idea is and what I should be expecting. Look at the next one. America has a public education system, not a thesis. This is just a statement of fact. We need to discuss what about it could be arguable, debatable, or has a certain viewpoint. For example, America has a public education system that is flawed, yet better than many countries. Okay, right there, you have a debate. Someone could argue that and debate it and have to back it up, and others could disagree with it, and they could also back up their view. All right, let's go to some more practice here. I've got this. Okay, so now this is going to be a little more, I wouldn't say complicated, but I think these are a little more deeper. Okay, this is, if you want a challenge here, this is how usually I've seen professors write up prompts. With the rise of social media addiction, many people's lives are being damaged by it, and some are calling for new solutions to help people get free from it. What are the effects of social media addiction on society? Should we have government-funded intervention to help those addicted? Why or why not? All right. Now, what makes this interesting here is the professor sets up before the questions kind of the topic here, right? What's the topic? Remember, your thesis must have a topic. Yep, it's right here. Listen, the main thing I find myself helping students do with their thesis is actually use the key words that are in the prompt. It's okay. Go ahead and use them. If you don't, we don't know what you're talking about. Use this social media addiction in your thesis sentence. All right. You could use the word effects, right? You can use the word government-funded intervention. As long as we figure out what is the main idea in one sentence of the entire paper, what's your position? Think of this as, those tests where you had a question and you had to write the complete sentence to answer the question. You couldn't just write the one word. So you had to use some of the words from the question. This is the actual part where you're going to be shaping your thesis. This is just to help you kind of see what's going on with the prompt here. What are the effects of social media addiction on society? Should we have government? Once you see the should, you could even use the word should in your thesis sentence. In fact, I recommend you do. The more clear you are about your position, the much stronger your thesis will be. So an example, let's type this in here. I'm going to start off by realizing you have two questions here. How can you answer two questions in one sentence? All right, so the effects of social media on society are, see, I'm using pretty much almost everything in the prompt, are reduced communication skills in person, increased depression. So this is based on readings that I've learned. So remember, never write a thesis. Never write your thesis if you haven't done your homework, if you haven't done your readings, if you haven't read articles, if you haven't filled your mind with real info. And the reason why I say that is most people are lost. They do not know what to do with a thesis if they haven't done their homework. So first get enough info to make a choice or a decision on an issue, and that you're able to take a position, and it's a lot easier to write a thesis. All right, so the effects of social media on society are reduced communication in person, increased depression, and cyber bullying, okay? The government should, see, I'm just using the same words, should fund intervention to help people get free, or help people recover from a social media addiction. Because, now why did I use the word because? Because we have the why or why not. I need, I don't know, 1 to 3 reasons why if I'm going to shoot for a 5-page paper. So the government should fund intervention to help people recover from social media addiction because it is just as powerful as drug addiction and keeps communities healthy. You know, now this right here, I have to prove, because someone could disagree that it's not. So I have to spend a half page probably with sources, and this one, I have to support this evidence. So I'm using articles and so what am I doing with a thesis right here? This is actually a 2-sentence thesis. It's perfectly fine. Not more than that, in my opinion. 1 to 2 sentences. I'm actually giving people a sign of the major parts of my 5-page essay. They're going to see part of my essay discuss this for a page or 2, I don't know, and then they're going to see that. They're going to see a section of my essay on the effects of social media on cyberbullying. They're going to see a paragraph or 2 on this. They're going to see a paragraph or 2 on that. So it's actually a roadmap for your essay. All right, let's move on to the next prompt question. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Riots are the language of the unheard." What does he mean by this statement? Write an essay examining the methods and impact of recent protests or rioting in American society and why they have or have not promoted the cause of racial injustice. All right, it seems like a lot, but you just got to take it slow, break it down. The first part is this right here. What does he mean? Go ahead and answer that in your own words. But really, your essay is this right here. Okay, so maybe this is for your introduction. And remember, your thesis comes at the end of your intro, which is what this will be, right? So maybe I have, 3 to 6 sentences introducing MLK's quote and what it means to me, right? That's for your intro paragraph. Okay. Then comes your thesis sentence that answers. It's not really a question. Some professors do not use questions. It's kind of tricky, huh? It's kind of a trick question here. I mean, when you see this, you don't see a question like this. This is pretty obvious. This is what I'm going to write about. Okay. But you can flip this into a question. In other words, take this and make it your own question to create a thesis. What are the methods and impact of recent protests, and why have they not promoted? See? So you just took it and you created your own starting point. So thesis sentence for this could be, let's see, I'm going to say examining the methods and impact of recent protests. All right. The recent, now this is me taking a position. So remember, this is not just reporting info like a book report or a science paper. The recent protests and rioting in America have shown aggressive and assertive methods how do I want to say this? The recent protests have been aggressive and assertive to raise awareness and pressure our nation's leadership to reform racism. I would say reduce. You can't fully eliminate racism. That's kind of my position on this too. So that's kind of where we're going to say to reduce racist policies in our what do we call it? In our justice system and police departments. Okay, it's one sentence, but it answers both parts here. It answers why they have or have not promoted the cause of racial justice. How do I know that? Because I wrote that it's raised awareness and increased pressure on our nation's leadership to reduce. See, so I've kind of done both. I could have split it into two sentences and then combined it. Some people do that because they want to take things slow. You can totally do that. So it could have been something like, right here, I could have just hit a period. That's the first part. The methods and impact, right? Or the methods, I mean, and then impact and why they have or have not comes for this last bit right here. Okay, so it could have been something like this. The recent protests and rioting in America have been aggressive and assertive. They have raised awareness and increased. See, so you got a two-part thesis or one part, it doesn't matter. But you got to start somewhere. Okay, now I got to just back up for a minute and just remind you, if you're not using a dictionary to really know what intervention means, or let's see here, methods, the word promoted, you're not going to know what the prompt is. If some professors use complicated words to write their prompt for an essay, so try to first get clarity on the instructions in the prompt. Do not skim over it and think you know what they're talking about. If you don't know what a word means, especially in a prompt, it's time to get the dictionary out and really look, or look it up online. Dictionary.com. Learnersdictionary.com is also good. Okay, so let's do our last one. This is, in my opinion, the most complicated one. It looks like, well, where's the question? There is no question. You're gonna have to create your own out of what they wrote. COVID-19 has spawned a wave of misinformation. So this is, again, like this one, the professor is setting up the topic. It's not the question yet, or it's not what you're gonna write about yet. Okay, COVID-19 has spawned a wave of misinformation, usually along conservative and liberal political lines. Again, if you're not sure what this stuff means, you got to look it up first. Some conservatives have gone so far as to call it a hoax. Look it up if you don't know what that means. And resist any form of social distancing, masks, or shutdown. Some liberals, rejecting reliable methods of contact tracing and quarantines from other nations, have used government regulations and enforcement of economic and social distance measures to reduce the spread of the virus at the cost of jobs, personal freedoms, and major financial loss. So far, all this professor is doing is setting up two sides to a story. Did you notice? Some conservatives, da-da-da-da, some liberals, da-da-da, and they kind of seem like very different things. So there's this two sides to the story thing about COVID and misinformation. That's your main issue. This is your main topic. Don't get confused with all of this right here. Your topic is right here. We're talking about misinformation about COVID. That usually has to do with people who are conservative or liberal. That is that they get ideas that are wrong about COVID, and somehow it's connected to their political views. That's basically what this is. Now, what are we supposed to do? What is the assignment? It's right here. Analyze two sources of misinformation. Okay, this is why you got to do your homework. You've got to do your readings, or you need to go get those sources if you don't have them before you jump into writing your essay. Provide readers reliable and accurate sources to combat it. Okay, so now you're actually getting more sources. So you're starting with two that are wrong about COVID, and then you're going to get other sources to fight back. Then give your personal experience of misinformation and what we should do as a society to win the battle against COVID-19. So there's parts of your essay that are about your personal experience. I would say that's probably the end, maybe the last page. And what we should do as a society is probably the last page or half page as well. Most of your essay is right here. You're probably looking at a page to analyze two sources of information, and you're looking at a page or page and a half to fight it with other sources. I'm looking at it, this is all based on a 5-page paper. It could be longer if the professor wants that. Well, shoot, how do we start with a thesis on this? Let's assume that you've already found your sources. Let's assume that you already know what you want to say. Okay, you've got enough info. Let's assume that you had some sort of class discussion or film or video or book about all this. What could a thesis look like? Okay, so remember, this is what we're looking at right here. I'm going to use the word misinformation. I'm going to kind of create a shopping list of words. Misinformation. What else? I'm going to use the word conservative, liberal, or maybe I'll just use the word political to keep it general. Because thesis sentences don't have to be super wordy. Let's see, what else? Looking at, what else? Sources, maybe the word sources right here. Okay, I think that's enough to create a thesis sentence. So let's bring this down here real quick. Okay, so let's see. COVID-19 pandemic has created, notice that I use the word created, they use the word spawned. I went and looked up the word spawn. I thought, oh, it has to do with like something being created. Has created a lot of misinformation along political lines of, let's say, along political lines. All right, so basically, here's what I realized. It's good to have an intro before the thesis for this, but here it is. Let's assume that in your intro, you bring up the topic, you introduce the two sources that the professor wants anyway. So you intro the two sources, just give a basic idea of what they're about. So I said, I just kind of made this stuff up, but it is actually true. There's this conspiracy theory by YouTube video that accuses Bill Gates of funding the creation and spread of COVID-19 to make money. The next source is News One's article. I don't know if it's from News One, but News One's article there is an article that implies that hospitals are reporting COVID deaths just to get more funding from the government. Those are two points of misinformation. And let's assume that that's in your paragraph for your intro. You got to bring in your thesis as the end. So let's imagine it's this. Both of these sources have deep flaws in logic and simply use fear in readers to increase distrust in institutional or governmental interventions. Okay, it's a little wordy, but that's just the way I write. You don't have to write this way. Basically, what I'm saying is these sources don't make any sense. And also, they use fear to keep people from trusting hospitals and the government from fighting this thing. Because distrust in the government is kind of already there. So they're just trying to keep that alive. And that's it. So that means for the rest of the paper, I'm exploring those sources, and I've given the reader a hint at why I think the sources are misinforming people and what their agenda is. This is a kind of a rhetorical analysis. If you've heard of that, what that means is you analyze a piece of writing or media, not just to summarize what it's saying, but it's how it's affecting somebody. They're using facts. Are they using emotions? Are they using experts? Are they using some form of persuasiveness? And you basically analyze it looking for those techniques, and you spend time breaking something down and showing how a person put it together. So that's it. I think you've had enough. I hope this was helpful to you, and go out there and make some really good thesis statements.